My name is Stuart, and at 68 years old, I finally sold my company for $58 million. I decided to celebrate with my son Thomas and his wife Jessica at Le Ciel, the finest restaurant in town. While they were slow dancing to their favorite song, the security guard approached my table with a concerned look. "Sir," he whispered, leaning close, "I saw him pour something into your juice when you weren't looking." In that moment, my world shattered. Before you continue watching this story, let me know where you're viewing from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to learn how I discovered my own son was plotting against me for money. I grew up in a tiny town in Montana, where everyone knew each other by first name. My father worked at the local sawmill, and my mother cleaned houses for the wealthier families in the next town over. We never had much, but they taught me the value of hard work and integrity. Those lessons stuck with me when I left for college on a partial scholarship, working nights at a gas station to cover the rest of my expenses. After graduation, I worked for several technology companies, learning the industry from the ground up. I noticed a gap in the market for specialized software that could help small businesses manage their operations more efficiently. With just $12,000 in savings and a mountain of determination, I founded TechServe Solutions in my garage apartment. That was 30 years ago. The early days were brutal. 18-hour workdays were common. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, pouring every spare penny back into the business. But slowly, painfully, the company grew. We landed our first major client when I was 39. By 45, we had offices in 3 states. That kind of success came with a devastating personal cost. Linda, my wife of 15 years, filed for divorce when our son Thomas was just 10 years old. "You're married to your company, Stuart, not to me," she said the night she left. I can still hear the resignation in her voice, the sound of her suitcase wheels on our driveway. Thomas went to live with her. I got him every other weekend and 2 weeks during summer break. Those visits were awkward, strained affairs. He was a quiet, serious child who grew into a reserved teenager. I tried buying him things to compensate for my absence, but the damage was already done. "Dad, you missed my championship game," he said once when he was 14. I scored the winning goal. "I know, buddy. I had an important investor meeting. I'll make it to the next one," I promised. There never was a next one. He quit soccer the following week. When Thomas left for college, our relationship consisted primarily of birthday calls and holiday visits. He majored in finance, perhaps hoping to understand the world that had stolen his father. During his junior year, he met Jessica at a campus fundraiser. The first time I met her, something felt off. Jessica was beautiful, intelligent, and charming, but there was a calculation in her eyes when she looked at me. She asked pointed questions about my company and my plans for the future. I brushed aside my concerns, just happy that Thomas had found someone who seemed to make him happy. They married 2 years after graduation. I paid for the wedding, an extravagant affair that Jessica insisted upon. Thomas seemed almost embarrassed by the opulence, but Jessica thrived in it, making sure everyone knew who was funding the celebration. As my 60th birthday approached, I began thinking about retirement. TechServe had grown beyond my wildest dreams, with over 300 employees and clients across the country. Several larger tech companies had approached me with offers to buy, but I had always declined, unwilling to let go of the company I had built from nothing. But, watching Thomas and Jessica at their wedding, I realized what my single-minded dedication to work had cost me. I had wealth, but no one to share it with. My son was practically a stranger. It was time to change that. When Megatech approached with a $58 million offer, I finally said yes. The negotiations took months, but eventually, we closed the deal. After taxes and setting aside funds for my employees, I walked away with $42 million, more money than I could spend in 2 lifetimes. The day after the deal closed, I called Thomas. "I sold the company," I said. "I thought we could celebrate together. You and Jessica. Dinner at Le Ciel." There was a pause on the line. That fancy French place downtown must have been some sale price. It was. "I want to share this moment with you, son. It's been too long since we really talked." Another pause. "Let me check with Jessica. Yeah, we can make it. This Friday? I made the reservation for Friday at 7:30. I arrived in my new Bentley, a personal indulgence I had allowed myself with my newfound freedom. The valets treated me with the deference reserved for wealthy regulars, though it was only my second time at the restaurant. Thomas and Jessica were already waiting in the lobby when I arrived. My son looked uncomfortable in his suit, but Jessica was radiant in a black dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. "Dad," Thomas said, offering his hand. I ignored it and pulled him into a hug. After a moment of stiffness, he returned it. Jessica kissed my cheeks. "Stuart, you look wonderful. Retirement clearly agrees with you." As we were led to our table, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild what I had lost. Maybe money could buy a second chance after all. Le Ciel occupied the entire top floor of the city's tallest building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the skyline, now glittering with lights as the sun set. Our table was positioned near one of these windows, giving us a breathtaking vista of the river and the mountains beyond. The maitre d' himself pulled out chairs for Jessica and me while Thomas seated himself. "Mr. Lewis, it is a pleasure to have you dining with us this evening. I understand congratulations are in order for the successful sale of your company." "News travels fast," I said, surprised. "In certain circles, very much so," he replied with a respectful nod. "Please enjoy your evening. Jacques will be your server tonight." Jacques appeared almost instantly, a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket. With the compliments of the house, he explained as he expertly uncorked it. The pop drew glances from nearby tables, and I noticed several people looking our way with interest. "What did you get for the company, Dad?" Thomas asked after Jacques had poured our champagne and disappeared. The news only mentioned it was a multi-million-dollar deal. $58 million, I said, watching their reactions carefully. Jessica's eyes widened, and she nearly choked on her champagne. Thomas looked stunned. "That is significant," he finally managed. "Incredible," Jessica exclaimed, her voice higher than normal. "You must be ecstatic, Stuart. What are your plans? Will you buy a bigger house? Travel?" I shrugged. "I haven't decided yet. The house is big enough for just me. Maybe travel, yes. But mostly I'm looking forward to having time. Time I should have taken years ago." I looked meaningfully at Thomas. He shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested in the menu. "The seafood looks good here," he mumbled. "Thomas works such long hours at the investment firm," Jessica said, placing her hand on my son's arm. 60, sometimes 70-hour weeks. Just like his father. I winced internally. "That's actually something I wanted to talk about. I have regrets, Thomas. Many of them. I was never there for you growing up, and that's my greatest failure." The waiter returned to take our orders, interrupting the moment. Thomas seemed relieved by the distraction. Jessica ordered the most expensive item on the menu, a lobster dish with truffle sauce. Thomas chose steak, and I selected the roasted duck. When Jacques left, I continued. "I was hoping we could spend more time together now. Maybe take a trip, just the two of us. Alaska, perhaps. You always wanted to go fishing there when you were a boy." Thomas looked surprised that I remembered. "You want to go fishing? You? People change, son. Or at least they can try to." Jessica interjected before Thomas could respond. "We should discuss investments, Stuart. Thomas has some excellent ideas for what you could do with your new liquidity. He is in finance, after all." "I was thinking of setting up a foundation, actually," I said. "Something to help kids from backgrounds like mine get a start in the tech industry." "Admirable," Jessica said quickly. "But you should definitely diversify. Real estate, securities, maybe even venture capital." Throughout the appetizer course, Jessica dominated the conversation, asking detailed questions about the sale and repeatedly bringing up the topic of my newfound wealth. Thomas remained largely silent, contributing only when directly addressed. Occasionally, I caught them exchanging glances, some sort of silent communication passing between them. As our main courses arrived, I proposed a toast. "To family," I said, raising my glass. "The most valuable asset of all." "To family," they echoed, Thomas not quite meeting my eyes. I tried again to connect with my son. Tell me about your work, Thomas. Are you enjoying the investment firm? It's fine, he said vaguely. Challenging. Competitive. He's being modest, Jessica cut in. He's on track for a promotion to senior analyst. His boss thinks very highly of him. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. I'm proud of you, son. I always have been, even if I didn't say it enough. Thomas looked uncomfortable with the praise. He glanced at Jessica, who gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. Dad, there's something we've been meaning to ask you, he began. Just then, the band in the corner of the restaurant changed tunes, starting a slow, romantic melody. Jessica's face lit up. Oh, Thomas, it's our song, she exclaimed, setting down her fork. We have to dance. My son looked relieved at the interruption. Would you mind, Dad? Of course not, I said, masking my disappointment at the broken moment of potential connection. Go ahead. They made their way to the small dance floor where a few other couples were already swaying to the music. I watched them, feeling oddly isolated despite the crowded restaurant. Jessica was whispering something in Thomas's ear. He nodded, looking back toward our table. I raised my water glass in a little salute. Mr. Lewis? I turned to find a man in a dark suit standing beside me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the alert posture of someone accustomed to watching for trouble. A security guard, though his attire was upscale enough to blend with the restaurant's clientele. Yes? I responded. He leaned down, speaking quietly near my ear. Sir, my name is Daniel. I'm with restaurant security. I need to speak with you about a matter of some concern. Is there a problem with my credit card? I asked, confused. No, sir. His voice dropped even lower. It's about your son. I saw him pour something into your juice while you were looking at the wine list. The words hit me like a physical blow. Excuse me? I managed, certain I had misheard. Daniel's expression remained professional but concerned. Your son, sir. While you were reviewing the wine list with the sommelier, he added something to your orange juice, a powder of some kind. He was very discreet, but I was positioned by the bar with a clear view of your table. My mind reeled, struggling to process this information. Thomas had indeed ordered me a fresh orange juice earlier, insisting I try it because they squeeze it tableside with some special tropical variety. There must be a mistake, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I recalled how insistent Thomas had been that I try the juice, his unusual attentiveness in refilling my water glass throughout the meal. I understand this is difficult to hear, sir, Daniel said quietly. I've worked security here for 12 years. I take the safety of our patrons very seriously. Why are you telling me this? Why not call the police? I asked, still not fully believing what I was hearing. Without evidence of what the substance is, it's your word against theirs. And frankly, sir, most wealthy patrons prefer discretion in such matters. Family disputes can be complicated. I glanced over at the dance floor where Thomas and Jessica continued to sway to the music, their heads close together in conversation. Had I imagined the way Thomas kept glancing back at our table? The way Jessica was watching me over his shoulder? I need a moment, I said, standing abruptly. Please, say nothing to them. Daniel nodded. Of course, sir. The untouched glass is still at your place setting if you wish to have it tested privately. I made my way to the restroom on unsteady legs, locking myself in a stall and leaning against the door. My heart was pounding painfully in my chest. Could this really be happening? My own son, trying to, what? Poison me? Drug me? For what purpose? The $42 million flashed through my mind. In the mirror above the sinks, I hardly recognized myself. My face was ashen, eyes wide with shock. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to think clearly. What did I really know about Thomas's life now? About his finances? We had drifted so far apart over the years. Jessica had mentioned his long hours at the investment firm, but was he successful there? I realized with shame that I had no idea. I paid for an extravagant wedding because Jessica wanted it, but I never asked if they needed help beyond that. Was Thomas in some kind of trouble? Gambling debts? Bad investments? And what about Jessica? She had been unusually interested in my money tonight, steering the conversation repeatedly toward my plans for it. A memory surfaced. 2 months ago, During a rare phone call, Thomas had asked pointed questions about my will. "Just making sure you have your affairs in order, Dad," he had said. "At your age, it's important to have everything documented properly." At the time, I had been touched by his concern. Now the conversation took on a more sinister tone. Around the same time, Jessica had mentioned her background in pharmaceutical research multiple times, almost as if she wanted me to know about her expertise in that area. Another realization struck me. The glass of juice was still on the table, untouched. If I confronted them now, it would create a scene. They might deny everything, dispose of the evidence. And if Thomas was truly capable of something like this, who knew how he might react when cornered? No, direct confrontation wasn't the answer. Not yet. I needed to gather more information, to understand what I was dealing with. For now, the safest course of action was to leave without drinking anything else. I would feign illness, a reasonable excuse to cut the evening short. I straightened my tie, took a deep breath, and forced my features into a neutral expression. Years of business negotiations had taught me how to mask my true feelings. I would need that skill now more than ever. When I returned to the table, Thomas and Jessica were just coming back from their dance. The juice glass sat innocently beside my water, a bright orange color that now seemed menacing rather than refreshing. "Dad, are you okay?" Thomas asked. "You look pale." "Fine, just a little tired," I lied. The excitement of the day catching up with me, I suppose. Jessica reached across the table to touch my hand. The gesture that might have seemed caring just moments ago now made my skin crawl. "You should try your juice, Stuart. It's full of vitamins. Might perk you right up." I noticed Thomas watching the glass intently, a slight tension around his eyes. Was that guilt in his expression? Or was I now seeing threats where none existed? "Maybe in a minute," I said, moving the glass slightly farther away. "Tell me, have you two thought about buying a house soon? The market in the Westridge neighborhood is excellent right now." Thomas blinked, seeming thrown by the change of subject. "We're happy in our apartment for now, though a house would be wonderful someday," Jessica added quickly. "Speaking of property, Thomas mentioned you have that beautiful estate on Lake Washington. Have you updated the estate plan since the sale? Assets of that magnitude require careful management." There it was, not even bothering with subtlety anymore. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. The estate plan, my will, my death. I pushed my chair back suddenly. "I think I need to call it a night. I'm not feeling well." "What's wrong?" Thomas asked, but I detected no real concern in his voice. Was that disappointment instead? Just some stomach discomfort. Might be coming down with something. I signaled for the check. Jessica frowned. "You should let us take you home, Stuart. We can take care of you." The words, "take care of you," hung in the air, taking on an ominous new meaning. "No need," I said firmly. "I have my driver on call. He can be here in 10 minutes. "But your dinner," Thomas protested weakly, gesturing to my barely touched plate. "And you haven't tried your special juice." "I've lost my appetite," I said, signing the check that Jacques had discreetly placed on the table. I left a $1,000 tip, writing, "Thank you" on the receipt with deliberate steadiness despite my trembling insides. "This was lovely," I said, standing, "but I really should go. We'll do this again soon." The goodbyes were awkward, strained. Jessica hugged me too tightly, her perfume suddenly cloying and suffocating. Thomas shook my hand with a grip that felt mechanical. "Feel better, Dad," he said, not meeting my eyes. As they watched me walk toward the exit, I made a detour to where Daniel stood near the bar. "The drink," I whispered. "Can you preserve it somehow? And the security footage from tonight?" He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "I'll take care of it, sir. Do you have someone you trust that I can contact?" I scribbled my private number on a business card. "Call me tomorrow. And thank you. You may have saved my life tonight." In the elevator down to the lobby, I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The magnitude of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. My son, my only child, might have just tried to kill me for money. The drive home was the longest of my life, despite the actual distance being only 15 miles. The city lights blurred through tears I refused to let fall. How had it come to this? Where had I gone so wrong? And most importantly, what was I going to do now? The next morning, I woke with a sense of unreality. Had last night actually happened? Or was it some bizarre stress-induced nightmare? But the business card for Daniel, the security guard on my nightstand, confirmed the terrible truth. My phone showed a missed call from an unknown number at 7:15 a.m. I returned the call immediately. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Mr. Lewis, I secured the glass as you requested. I also made a copy of the security footage from last night. The restaurant owner is a personal friend. He understands the sensitivity of the situation. I appreciate that," I said, my voice rough from a night of little sleep. "What happens now?" "That depends on what you want to do, sir. I know someone who can analyze the contents of the glass discreetly. A former police lab technician who now works privately." "Yes, please. And I'll need the contact information for a good private investigator." "I can help with that too. There's someone I recommend highly, Frank Delgado, former FBI." After ending the call, I sat in my kitchen, staring out at the lake. The house had seemed too large and empty after Linda left. Now it felt like a fortress, the only place I could be sure of my safety. My phone rang again. Thomas. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Hey, Dad. Just checking in to see if you're feeling better. Jessica made some soup. We thought we might bring it over later. Call me back." Soup. After potentially poisoning me, they wanted to bring me soup. The audacity was almost admirable. I texted back. "Feeling better. Doctor advised rest. We'll call tomorrow." Less than a minute later, Jessica called. I declined the call. She left no message but texted, "So glad you're improving. Should we bring dinner instead? I can make that chicken dish you liked at Christmas." The persistence was alarming. I responded, "Taking medication that makes me drowsy. Not up for visitors. Thanks anyway." 3 more calls came over the next 2 hours. I ignored them all. The 4th call was from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Mr. Lewis? This is Frank Delgado. Daniel told me you might need my services." Frank arrived at my house an hour later. He was shorter than I expected, compact and unassuming, with observant eyes that missed nothing. After I explained the situation, he nodded thoughtfully. "First, we need to know what was in that drink. That will tell us intent. Second, we need to understand the motive beyond the obvious financial gain. And third, we need to know if your daughter-in-law is involved, or if your son is acting alone." "My gut says she's the driving force," I said. "Often the case," Frank agreed. "Let me run backgrounds on both of them. Financial records, employment history, previous relationships. If there's something to find, I'll find it." 2 days later, Daniel delivered the glass to Frank's contact at the lab. I provided Frank with all the information I had on Thomas and Jessica, including her maiden name and previous addresses. While waiting for results, I maintained minimal contact with Thomas and Jessica, claiming a lingering illness that required rest. Their increasingly insistent attempts to visit raised red flags that confirmed my suspicions. Each time, I made excuses. Each time, their texts and voicemails became more urgent. "Dad, we really need to talk about some financial decisions, while the market conditions are favorable. Stuart, Thomas and I are worried about you living alone while you're unwell. We think we should stay with you for a few days." On day 4, Frank called with his preliminary findings. "Your son has significant gambling debts, Mr. Lewis. Sports betting mainly, some online poker. He's underwater on his mortgage by about $200,000, and there are 3 maxed-out credit cards. He's been borrowing from high-interest lenders for the past 8 months. My heart sank. And Jessica? That's where it gets interesting. This isn't her first rodeo. She was briefly engaged to a man named Harold Winters, age 64, wealthy real estate developer. The engagement ended when he died unexpectedly of what was ruled a heart attack. She was the sole beneficiary of a recently updated will. "My God," I whispered. There wasn't enough evidence to charge her, but the timing raised questions. 2 years before that, she dated a professor at her university, 30 years her senior, recently divorced. He became ill with symptoms that baffled doctors. They broke up, he recovered. No proof of wrongdoing, but the pattern is concerning. And her pharmaceutical background. She has a master's degree in biochemistry with a focus on pharmacology. Worked briefly for a research lab before switching to pharmaceutical sales, which is how she met your son. The lab results came back the next day. The juice contained a powerful sedative, 3 times the normal dosage. Not immediately lethal, but enough to make me appear extremely intoxicated, potentially causing me to fall or have an accident. If combined with alcohol, which I had been drinking earlier, it could have suppressed my respiratory system to dangerous levels. Frank's continued investigation uncovered more disturbing information. Thomas and Jessica had taken out a $5 million life insurance policy on me 6 months ago, with my son as the beneficiary. They had also been meeting with a real estate agent to look at multi-million-dollar properties, far beyond what they could afford on their current incomes. The security footage from Le Ciel confirmed what Daniel had reported. While I was discussing wine with the sommelier, Thomas clearly removed something from his jacket pocket and quickly emptied it into my juice glass when he thought no one was watching. Most damning of all, Frank discovered emails between Thomas and Jessica discussing their financial windfall that would solve all their problems. While they never explicitly mentioned harming me, the timing aligned perfectly with their increased interest in my estate planning. After a week of gathering evidence, I was faced with a decision: go to the police or confront them myself. The evidence was circumstantial at best. Without catching them in the act a second time, it might not be enough for criminal charges. I called my attorney, Margot Winters, a sharp-minded woman who had helped me with the company's sale. After reviewing everything Frank had discovered, she advised a controlled confrontation. Invite them to discuss your will, she suggested. Record the conversation. See if you can get them to reveal something incriminating. I'll have the documents prepared that suggest you're planning to leave everything to Thomas, but they won't be executed. It's bait. The trap was set. I invited Thomas and Jessica to my home to discuss important estate matters that couldn't wait any longer. They accepted with almost indecent speed. I chose my study for the meeting. Frank installed discreet recording devices and would monitor from the adjacent room. Margot would arrive halfway through, playing the role of my attorney bringing documents for signature. They arrived precisely on time, Jessica wearing a concerned expression so practiced it almost seemed genuine. Thomas looked nervous, fidgeting with his watch as they settled into the chairs across from my desk. "Thank you both for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "As you know, my recent business transaction has significantly changed my financial situation. It's time to update my will accordingly." Jessica leaned forward eagerly. "That's so responsible of you, Stuart. Peace of mind is important at any age." "Indeed," I replied, studying her beautiful, treacherous face. "Thomas is my only heir, of course, but there are questions about timing, trusts versus direct inheritance, tax implications. Whatever is easiest for you, Dad," Thomas said, not meeting my eyes. I opened a folder on my desk. "Before we get to that, I wanted to ask about something else." I removed the laboratory analysis of the juice and placed it on the desk. "Can either of you tell me what Rohypnol is?" The color drained from Thomas's face. Jessica remained perfectly composed, but her eyes hardened. "It's a sedative," she said smoothly. "Why do you ask?" "Because a rather large dose of it was found in my orange juice at Le Ciel last week, the night we celebrated my company sale." Thomas began to stammer. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." I placed the security camera still frame on the desk next. It clearly showed Thomas adding something to my drink. "Don't bother denying it," I said, my voice ice cold. "I have the footage, the lab results, and a witness. What I don't have is an understanding of how my only son could try to harm his father for money." Thomas crumbled immediately, putting his head in his hands. "Jessica said it would just make you sleepy, so you'd sign the papers without reading them carefully. I never meant to hurt you." Jessica's transformation was instantaneous. Her nurturing facade vanished, replaced by calculating fury. "Shut up, Thomas. He's recording this. He has no real evidence." "I know about Harold Winters," I said, looking directly at her, "and Professor Aldridge. I know about the life insurance policy, the house shopping, The emails discussing your upcoming windfall that would solve all your gambling debts, Thomas. My son looked up, his face a mask of shame and fear. Dad, she said we were just going to borrow money from you. But then you kept talking about a foundation, giving it all away. She said we deserved it more than strangers. So you tried to drug me? What was the plan? Wait until I was incapacitated and have me sign something? Or was I supposed to have an accident on the way home? Fall down the stairs, perhaps? It wasn't like that, Thomas protested weakly. It was exactly like that, Jessica hissed, dropping all pretense. Your father never cared about you, Thomas. He abandoned you for his precious company. Now he's going to abandon you again by giving all his money to some stupid charity. We deserve that money. We need it. Why, Jessica? I asked, genuinely curious despite my disgust. You're young, educated. Why chase wealth through such despicable means? Because people like you hoard it all, she spat. Old men who did nothing special except be in the right place at the right time. Do you know how hard I've worked? How brilliant I am? And still, the only way to get ahead is to attach myself to money. Thomas was supposed to inherit millions, but he's too weak to stand up to you. So you thought you'd speed up the timeline of my death? I asked. You weren't supposed to die, Thomas said quickly. Just sign some papers. This time, I replied. What about next time? When the money ran out, would it be a larger dose then? An untraceable poison Jessica concocted with her pharmaceutical knowledge? The study door opened, and Margot entered with a police detective. Frank followed, holding up a small receiver. Got it all, Mr. Lewis. Clear as day. Jessica lunged for the door, but the detective blocked her path. Jessica Reynolds, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy. As the detective read them their rights, Thomas looked at me with tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Dad. She said she'd leave me if I didn't help her. I was desperate. I could feel no satisfaction as they were led away in handcuffs, only a profound sadness that hollowed out my chest. The son I had failed so badly as a father had just tried to kill me for money. There was no victory here, only tragedy. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and police interviews. The case against Jessica was strong, built on physical evidence and her own damning statements during the confrontation. Thomas, following his lawyer's advice, agreed to testify against her in exchange for reduced charges. Frank continued his investigation, digging deeper into Jessica's past. What he uncovered was even more disturbing than we initially suspected. Harold Winters didn't die of natural causes, Frank reported during one of our meetings. The medical examiner noted unusual toxicology findings, but couldn't identify the compound. The case was reopened briefly last year when another man came forward with suspicions about Jessica, but there wasn't enough evidence to proceed. And this other man? I asked. Professor Aldridge. He believes Jessica was slowly poisoning him during their relationship. His symptoms disappeared after they broke up. He's willing to testify about his experience. The district attorney was building a case that extended beyond the attempt on my life. They executed a search warrant on Thomas and Jessica's apartment, finding a collection of pharmaceutical compounds, research notes on untraceable poisons, and draft emails discussing Stewart's accident and how to ensure it looks natural. I hired a separate attorney for Thomas, hoping to mitigate the damage to my son's life. The evidence clearly pointed to Jessica as the mastermind, with Thomas as her manipulated accomplice. Still, his actions were his own, and the betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. 10 days after the arrest, I received permission to visit Thomas at the detention center. He sat across from me in a drab gray jumpsuit, looking like he had aged a decade. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders hunched with the weight of his actions. Why, Thomas? I asked simply. He couldn't meet my gaze. The gambling started small. Office pools, fantasy football, then sports betting. I thought I could win it all back with the next bet. Before I knew it, I was down almost $400,000. You could have come to me. After a lifetime of trying to prove I didn't need your help, that I could succeed on my own? He shook his head. My pride wouldn't let me. Then I met Jessica. She was beautiful, confident, ambitious, everything I wasn't. When she chose me, I couldn't believe my luck. When did she learn about your family? Early on, I mentioned you owned a successful tech company. She became very interested after that. He laughed bitterly. I should have seen the signs. She started pushing me to reconnect with you, to repair the relationship. I actually thought she cared about my emotional well-being. I leaned forward. Thomas, I need to know. Was this the first attempt? He looked up, shocked. Yes, Dad, I swear. The Christmas dinner Jessica mentioned? She wanted to bring a bottle of whiskey with something added to it. I refused. That's why we brought wine instead. My blood ran cold at how close they had come to succeeding. If Thomas had been even slightly more compliant with Jessica's schemes, I might not be sitting here now. What did she have over you? Why go through with it at the restaurant? Thomas's eyes filled with tears. She threatened to leave me, said she'd found someone else, someone with real ambition who wasn't a pathetic gambler. I was going to lose everything, my job, my marriage, my reputation, and I was weak, too weak to stand up to her. The preliminary hearing was a media circus. Reporters dubbed Jessica the Black Widow in training and painted Thomas as either her dupe or willing accomplice, depending on which outlet you read. The prosecution presented the evidence from the restaurant, the lab results, the emails, and Jessica's recorded confession in my study. Jessica's attorney attempted to portray her as a victim of my son's gambling addiction, forced into desperate measures to save their marriage. The strategy fell apart when Professor Aldridge testified about his mysterious illness during their relationship and his suspicions that she had been poisoning his tea. Most painful was testifying myself, describing the moment when Daniel, the security guard, informed me of what he had witnessed. Looking at my son in the defendant's box, seeing the shame on his face as the court heard how he had betrayed his own father. After weighing the evidence, the judge ordered Jessica to stand trial for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. For Thomas, accepting the plea agreement, the charges were reduced to conspiracy and attempted fraud. He would likely serve probation and community service rather than jail time. While awaiting trial, Jessica filed for divorce from Thomas. Her parents, wealthy socialites from Connecticut, hired a team of expensive lawyers who attempted to paint her as mentally unstable and not responsible for her actions. The strategy failed when her detailed research notes on untraceable poisons were entered into evidence, showing clear premeditation. Thomas moved in with a former college roommate after being released on bail. He called me daily, desperate for forgiveness, for some sign that our relationship could be salvaged. Each conversation was stilted, painful. The trust between us shattered, perhaps beyond repair. After one particularly difficult call, I sat on my deck overlooking the lake, wrestling with my conflicted feelings. I had failed Thomas as a father, putting my business before his well-being throughout his childhood. Had that created the desperation that made him vulnerable to Jessica's manipulation? Was I partly responsible for what had happened? Yet accountability worked both ways. Thomas was an adult who had made his own choices, however influenced by circumstances. He had poured a sedative into my drink with his own hand. No amount of external pressure completely absolved him of that choice. After 3 months of legal proceedings, Jessica was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Thomas, as part of his plea deal, received 5 years probation, mandatory counseling, and 2,000 hours of community service. He was also required to enter a gambling addiction treatment program. The day after Thomas's sentencing, I invited him to my house. We sat in the same study where the confrontation had occurred, the weight of everything that had transpired hanging heavily between us. "I'm starting therapy next week," he said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "And Gamblers Anonymous tomorrow." "That's good," I replied, unsure what else to say. "Dad, I know I can never make this right. What I did was unforgivable." "Why did you call me?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me. "After the restaurant, why check if I was okay if the plan was to harm me?" He looked surprised. "Jessica made me call. She was angry that you left before drinking the juice. She wanted to try again with the soup. The calculation of it all made me feel ill." "I see. I'm moving to Oregon," Thomas said after another long silence. "My friend Mark has a construction company there. He's offered me a job, manual labor, starting at the bottom. I think the physical work will be good for me. Help me stay clean from gambling. Part of me was relieved. Distance would make it easier to process everything that had happened. But another part, the father in me, felt the loss of another chance to connect with my only child. I think that's for the best, I said finally. We both need time, Thomas. What happened can't be undone with an apology. He nodded, eyes downcast. I understand. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry. Not just for what happened at the restaurant, but for letting Jessica come between us. For being too proud to ask for help when I needed it. As he stood to leave, I felt compelled to offer something, some small connection to hold on to. Write to me from Oregon. Let me know how you're doing. A spark of hope lit his face. I will, Dad. I promise. After he left, I walked through my large, empty house. The walls were covered with awards and recognitions from my business career, but not a single family photo. No evidence of the son I had raised or the life we might have shared. That night, I called my real estate agent and told her to list the house. It was time for a fresh start, somewhere without the weight of recent events. Somewhere I could begin to heal. The media attention surrounding the case was relentless. My face appeared on the front page of newspapers, on local news broadcasts, and across internet news sites. Tech millionaire, targeted by son and daughter, in law and poisoning plot, read one headline. Family betrayal. The Stuart Lewis case proclaimed another. Strangers approached me in public, some offering sympathy, others simply curious about the man who had been betrayed by his own family. I became increasingly reclusive, venturing out only when necessary. Jessica's family launched a public relations campaign, attempting to salvage their daughter's reputation by suggesting that Thomas was the true mastermind, and Jessica an unwitting participant. When evidence clearly contradicted this narrative, they switched tactics, claiming Jessica suffered from mental illness that had gone undiagnosed and untreated. Her trial became a national sensation, drawing comparisons to other cases of spouses who had murdered or attempted to murder for inheritance. Expert witnesses dissected her psychology, her history, her calculated approach to gaining wealth through relationships with older or financially successful men. Thomas, despite his lesser legal consequences, suffered significant personal and professional fallout. His investment firm terminated his employment. Former friends distanced themselves. His credit was destroyed, his reputation in tatters. I received a call from Jessica's mother 2 weeks before the sentencing. Margaret Reynolds was a polished, articulate woman whose voice betrayed no emotion as she made her request. Mr. Lewis, we believe our daughter needs psychological help, not imprisonment. If you were to speak to the judge on her behalf, request leniency and treatment instead of incarceration, it would carry significant weight. Mrs. Reynolds, your daughter methodically planned to drug me, potentially causing my death, for financial gain. She has a pattern of similar behavior with other men. Why would I advocate for leniency? Because she's mentally ill, Mr. Lewis, and because your son was equally complicit. You've already shown him mercy. My son accepted responsibility and is making amends. Your daughter continues to deny wrongdoing and blame others. The situations are not comparable. She paused. We're prepared to make it worth your while. Financially speaking, I hung up without responding. The following day, a formal letter arrived from their attorney, offering a substantial settlement in exchange for my testimony supporting a mental health defense. I forwarded it to the district attorney as evidence of attempted witness tampering. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 days, recounting the events at LaCielle, the subsequent investigation, and the confrontation in my study. Looking at Jessica in the courtroom, her expression cold and calculating despite the gravity of her situation, I felt a chill of recognition. She truly believed she deserved my money more than I did, that her wants superseded my right to live. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, Jessica showed no reaction. Her face remained impassive as the judge sentenced her to 15 years in state prison. Only when they led her away did she turn to glare at Thomas, who sat in the back of the courtroom, a look of pure hatred that made him physically recoil. Thomas's formal sentencing came a week later. 5 years probation, 2,000 hours of community service, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, financial restitution to be determined. The judge acknowledged his cooperation with authorities and genuine remorse as mitigating factors. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions as we emerged. "Mr. Lewis, do you forgive your son?" "Thomas, how does it feel to know your wife will be in prison for 15 years?" "Mr. Lewis, will you be financially supporting Thomas during his probation?" I placed my hand on Thomas's shoulder, partly to guide him through the crowd, partly as a show of support for the cameras. It was the first physical contact we'd had since the confrontation in my study. He seemed startled by the gesture but grateful. Once safely in my car, the facade of unity dropped away. The silence between us was heavy, charged with all that remained unsaid. "I meant what I said about Oregon." Thomas finally spoke. "I'm leaving next week. Mark has an apartment above his garage I can use until I find my own place." "I've listed the house," I replied. "Too many memories here, good and bad." He nodded, looking out the window at the passing scenery. "Will you stay in Washington?" "For now." I bought a smaller place on Whidbey Island. More privacy, more silence. The unspoken question hung between us. What happens to us now? Father and son bound by blood but separated by betrayal. "I need time, Thomas," I said as we pulled up to his friend's apartment where he had been staying. "I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't go back to normal family dinners and holiday gatherings. Not yet. Maybe not ever." His shoulders slumped, but he nodded. "I understand. I wouldn't either, if I were you. That doesn't mean I don't care what happens to you. It doesn't mean I want you to suffer. But you can't trust me anymore." He finished my thought. "No," I agreed softly. "I can't." He gathered his briefcase, hand on the door handle. "I'll send you my address in Oregon, in case you ever want to write." "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity of it. As I watched him walk away, shoulders hunched against not just the drizzling rain but the weight of his actions, I felt the finality of it. Something fundamental had broken between us. Perhaps it had been broken long before the restaurant, before Jessica, when I chose my company over being present for my son's childhood. Now we would both live with the consequences of our choices. The house sold quickly, well above asking price. I donated most of the furniture to charity, keeping only a few personal items. The new place on Whidbey Island was modern, all glass and cedar, with views of Puget Sound. It was half the size of the lake house but still far too large for just one person. In the quiet evenings, I would sit on the deck with a glass of whiskey, watching ferries cross the Sound, and wonder where I had gone wrong. Had my absence during Thomas's formative years created the insecurity that made him vulnerable to someone like Jessica? Would a stronger relationship have given him the confidence to come to me when he was in financial trouble, rather than resorting to such desperate measures? Or was I simply making excuses for him, unable to accept that my son was capable of such a betrayal? The questions haunted me, keeping me awake long into the night. Thomas called once a week from Oregon. Awkward conversations that rarely lasted more than 5 minutes. He told me about his job on the construction site, the physical exhaustion that helped him sleep without thinking about gambling, the Gamblers Anonymous meetings he attended 3 times weekly. I told him about the new house, the foundation I was establishing, the consulting work I'd taken on to keep busy. We never discussed Jessica or the case. It was as if we had silently agreed to cordon off that part of our shared history, too painful to acknowledge directly. 3 months after Thomas moved to Oregon, Jessica's appeal was denied. She would serve at least 10 years before becoming eligible for parole. Thomas filed for divorce, which Jessica contested despite the overwhelming evidence of her crimes. Eventually, the divorce was granted on grounds of criminal misconduct. My new home on Whidbey Island became my sanctuary. I planted a garden, took up woodworking, and began volunteering at a local literacy program teaching adults to read. The structure of these activities helped fill the emptiness that had settled in my chest since that night at Lyciel. Yet despite building this new life, I couldn't escape the fundamental loneliness of my situation. I had wealth beyond most people's dreams, but no family to share it with. The foundation I established to help underprivileged youth enter the tech industry gave me purpose, but it couldn't replace the connection of family. 6 months after Thomas moved to Oregon, I received a handwritten letter rather than his usual phone call. "Dad," it began, "I've been thinking a lot about why I did what I did. My therapist says it's important to understand the root causes of our destructive behaviors. I think I was trying to get your attention the only way I knew how as a child, by being in trouble. When that didn't work, I escalated. First with gambling, then with Jessica's plan. I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong, period. But I'm trying to understand it so I never go down that path again. I think we both contributed to the distance between us, though only I am responsible for my criminal actions. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm working hard to become someone different, someone better, someone worthy of eventually being your son again." I read the letter 3 times, emotions warring within me. Anger at what felt like Thomas shifting blame to me. Relief that he was gaining insight into his actions. Sadness for the years of disconnection that had led us here. After careful consideration, I wrote back, "Thomas, thank you for your honesty. You're right that we both contributed to the distance between us. I failed you as a father in many ways, prioritizing business success over being present for you. That was my mistake, one I deeply regret. Your actions at the restaurant were your choice alone, but I understand you're trying to see the bigger picture of how we got to that point. I respect the work you're doing in therapy and your commitment to change. I don't know what our relationship will look like going forward. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild, but I am willing to keep the door open to the possibility of reconciliation, given time and continued effort on both our parts." I signed it simply, "Dad," and mailed it the next day. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start, a small crack in the wall of hurt and betrayal that had sprung up between us. Whether that crack would widen into a doorway or seal itself shut again remained to be seen. In the meantime, I had a life to rebuild, one where I defined success not by the company I built or the money I earned, but by the connections I formed and the difference I made in others' lives. It was a hard lesson, learned far too late, at a cost higher than anyone should have to pay. 6 months turned into a year. The seasons changed on Whidbey Island, summer giving way to a spectacular fall, then a gray, rainy winter that matched my mood. Spring brought unexpected renewal, not just to the landscape but to my outlook as well. I joined a support group for people who had experienced family betrayal. There were parents whose adult children had stolen from them, siblings who had defrauded each other, spouses who discovered double lives. My story, while dramatic, was not unique. There was comfort in that, in knowing others had walked this painful path and found their way forward. Angela was part of that group. A widow in her early 60s, she had discovered after her husband's death that he had a second family in another state. Her adult children had known and kept it from her for years. Her journey through shock, grief, and eventual acceptance resonated with me. We began meeting for coffee after group sessions, then for dinner occasionally. Angela was straightforward, practical, and unexpectedly funny. She made no demands and offered simple friendship when I needed it most. "The trick," she told me during one of our conversations, "is to acknowledge the pain without letting it define you. Yes, my husband betrayed me for decades. Yes, my children lied to protect him. Those are facts. But they're not the sum total of who I am or what my life means." Her wisdom helped me gain perspective on my situation with Thomas. The betrayal was real. The broken trust was real. But those things didn't have to be the end of our story if we chose to write new chapters. Thomas continued his weekly calls, which gradually became less awkward. He told me about his promotion to crew supervisor at the construction company, his new apartment in downtown Portland, the community college classes he was taking in business administration. I shared updates about the foundation, my woodworking projects, the adult literacy students whose progress gave me such satisfaction. My attorney, Margot, helped me restructure my estate plan. Instead of leaving everything to Thomas, I established a trust that would provide him a modest income while directing the bulk of my wealth to charitable causes. It wasn't punitive, it was practical. Thomas himself agreed it was the right approach when I discussed it with him. Money was the problem between us, he acknowledged. Taking the financial pressure off the relationship might be the healthiest thing for both of us. The foundation I established, Lewis TechStart, began showing promising results. We provided scholarships, mentoring, and internships to young people from disadvantaged backgrounds interested in technology careers. Watching these students flourish gave me purpose beyond anything I had experienced building my own company. I also found unexpected fulfillment in mentoring small business owners, sharing the lessons I had learned through 3 decades of entrepreneurship. Their fresh enthusiasm and innovative ideas kept my mind active and engaged. Angela and I grew closer, though neither of us rushed into defining our relationship. We were both cautious after our respective experiences of betrayal, but her companionship filled a void in my life, providing conversation and understanding without the complexity of family dynamics. 14 months after the incident at Les Ciels, Thomas called with news. I've been accepted to the business program at Portland State, full-time, starting this fall. Between scholarships and what I've saved working construction, I can make it work financially. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for him. You always had a good head for business. I was thinking, he said hesitantly, maybe I could visit before classes start in September, just for a weekend, if that would be okay with you. I paused, considering the request. We hadn't seen each other in person since he left for Oregon. Was I ready? Was he? There was only one way to find out. I think that would be good, I replied. The guest room has a great view of the Sound. When Thomas arrived that August weekend, I barely recognized him. Construction work had broadened his shoulders and tanned his formerly pale skin. He carried himself differently, too, with a quiet confidence that had replaced his nervous demeanor. Our initial greeting was awkward, a handshake that turned into a brief, stiff hug. But as the weekend progressed, the tension gradually eased. We took long walks along the beach, grilled salmon on the deck, and slowly, carefully began rebuilding a relationship fundamentally different from what we had before. I thought money would solve all my problems, Thomas admitted as we sat watching the sunset on my deck. When I started gambling, I convinced myself one big win would fix everything. Then with Jessica, I believed inheriting your wealth would give me the security and respect I craved. I was chasing the wrong thing all along. I made the same mistake, I confessed. I thought business success would validate me, prove I was better than my humble beginnings. I sacrificed everything for it, including being a present father to you. By the time I realized my error, the damage was done. Do you think we can ever have a normal father-son relationship? He asked quietly. I considered the question carefully. I don't think we can have what we might have had if I'd made different choices when you were growing up. Too much has happened. But maybe we can build something new, something better than what we had before, because it's based on honesty rather than expectations. He nodded slowly. I'd like that. Before Thomas left that Sunday, we made plans for him to return for Thanksgiving. A small step, but significant. Neither of us mentioned Jessica, though her shadow lingered in unspoken thoughts. She would be eligible for parole in 8 more years. A problem for another day. As I approached my 70th birthday, I made a decision that surprised even me. I donated half my remaining fortune to a variety of causes: education for underprivileged youth, mental health resources for families in crisis, rehabilitation programs for people rebuilding lives after incarceration. Money had nearly cost me everything. Perhaps it could now help others avoid similar fates. My journey of healing wasn't linear. There were still days when anger flared hot and bright, when thoughts of what might have happened at that restaurant made sleep impossible. But those days grew fewer as time passed and new experiences layered over the painful ones. Thomas graduated with honors from Portland State and started a small consulting firm, helping construction companies optimize their operations. He never asked for financial help, though I offered it once. I need to do this on my own, he explained. For me, not for you. I respected his decision and watched with quiet pride as he built his business client by client, project by project. When he married Alicia, a kind, straightforward woman he met through his business program, I welcomed her warmly into what remained of our family. Their first child, My granddaughter, Lily, brought an unexpected joy into my life at 73. Angela and I eventually married in a small ceremony on the beach near my home. Thomas served as my best man. It was a second chance at happiness neither of us had expected, but both deeply appreciated. Looking back on the journey from that terrible night at Ciel to where I am now, I realize how profoundly the experience changed me. The betrayal could have left me bitter, isolated, and mistrustful. Instead, it forced me to reevaluate everything: what I valued, how I connected with others, what legacy I wanted to leave. True wealth, I've learned, isn't measured in dollars or possessions. It's found in authentic connections with others, in making a positive difference in the world, in finding purpose beyond yourself. Money can enhance life's opportunities, but it can't create meaning or genuine relationships. Trust, once broken, is never quite the same. But new trust can be built, different from the blind faith we place in those who haven't yet disappointed us. This new trust is stronger in some ways, because it's chosen with open eyes, with full awareness of the risks involved. Thomas and I will never fully recover what was lost that night at the restaurant. The memory will always be there, a scar on our relationship. But we've built something new from the ruins, something perhaps stronger and more authentic than what existed before. We speak truths to each other now that were long buried under expectations and disappointments. If you ever face betrayal by someone you love, know that the pain, however overwhelming, doesn't have to define the rest of your life. You can choose to learn from it, grow beyond it, and perhaps even find greater wisdom and compassion through the experience. The path forward isn't about forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. It's about integrating that experience into a larger life story that continues to unfold in meaningful ways. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone close to you? What helped you move forward? I'd be interested to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this account of my journey has resonated with you in any way, please consider sharing it with others who might find comfort or insight in it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about life's difficult lessons and the wisdom that can emerge from our greatest challenges. Thank you for listening. And remember, our worst moments don't have to be our defining ones.